All right, pull up a chair. Today, I want you to imagine we're sitting across from each other, opening up a major classified case file. We are looking at the intricate details of one of the most staggering, audacious investigations in modern American history. Look, this isn't your standard story of petty theft. This is a deep dive into America's most wanted fraud case. It's a narrative that begins with a quiet, calculated conspiracy and ends in a full-blown global manhunt. So get ready, because we are tracking the footprint of what authorities are calling a billion-dollar betrayal. Okay, let's dive into this. Imagine literally vanishing off the face of the earth. But you aren't running after holding up a bank or pulling off some elaborate movie casino heist. No, you were vanishing after being accused in a massive, systematic Medicare fraud conspiracy. For nearly 2 years, authorities say this individual completely disappeared. There was no courtroom appearance, no sentencing, absolutely no trace left behind. It was a complete ghosting of the federal justice system, and it kicked off a sprawling mystery that would ultimately take investigators thousands of miles away from home just to solve it.
Part 1. The ultimate paper heist.
Now, what's really interesting about what we're looking at here is the contrast. To understand this escape, we really have to look at the incredibly unconventional scale of this operation. When we picture a massive robbery, Hollywood trains us to imagine loud alarms, ski masks, drilling into steel vaults, screeching getaway cars. But as the federal investigators working this case pointed out, the reality of a modern, massive financial crime, it's entirely different. It is a quiet, invisible heist. The weapons of choice here are paperwork, phone calls, and invoices. It's all about exploiting the very foundation of our healthcare network, which are systems built entirely on trust.
And because it was so quiet, the numbers grew to an almost unfathomable level, $1.2 billion. Just let that sit with you for a second. According to investigators, this staggering figure represents the alleged total Medicare billing activity accumulated in this single conspiracy. I mean, we aren't talking about a few padded invoices here. We are talking about an industrial-scale operation that ruthlessly exploited structural weaknesses in the healthcare billing system, weaknesses that allowed massive payouts with minimal initial oversight.
Part 2. Inside the scheme. So, the crucial point is understanding the step-by-step pipeline authorities say was built here. It started at step 1, with call centers directly contacting patients, and they were specifically targeting the elderly. Testimonials from this case reveal a completely heartbreaking emotional toll. You have vulnerable seniors receiving unsolicited calls from people they believed were trusted medical professionals, only to realize way later that they were just pawns in a scam. Step 2, these call centers directed those patients into their specific network. Step 3 is where the actual billing occurred, charging Medicare for orthopedic braces that prosecutors explicitly described as medically unnecessary. And finally, Step 4, repeat this entire process across thousands of beneficiaries to accumulate billions in charges. It was literally a factory line of fraud.
This created a massive, glaring discrepancy that investigators eventually had to untangle. Because, look, if you looked just at the paperwork, the surface level, it all looked totally fine. It looked like legitimate medical equipment being provided to seniors who actually needed help. But behind the scenes, federal authorities alleged a totally different reality. The facade held up under initial scrutiny because the fake invoices were meticulously coded with standard medical terminology, and they were carefully staggered to mimic normal billing patterns. It was purposely engineered to bypass algorithmic red flags and quietly hide the billions being siphoned right out of the Medicare system.
Part 3. The 2019 disappearance. And this timeline brilliantly illustrates how the case got derailed so rapidly. 4 years before 2019, federal agents rigorously gathered digital evidence. They're tracking offshore financial flows, building an airtight case against this conspiracy. This meticulous work finally culminated in 2019, when federal authorities stated the accused actually entered guilty pleas to multiple fraud-related offenses. So the case was effectively closed, right? Wrong. Just before sentencing was supposed to happen, the defendant vanished. A missed court appearance triggered a federal warrant, and literally overnight, this shifted from a standard paper prosecution into a frantic search.
That one missed court date completely changed the DNA of the investigation. It officially became a fugitive investigation. The stakes were immediately elevated. The federal agents working this case weren't just accountants tracking fraudulent invoices anymore. They were now hunters tracking a human being. The case stopped being solely about healthcare fraud and morphed into a high-stakes global manhunt. In fact, federal agents noted this rivaled the intensity of searches typically reserved for infamous cartel leaders or Wall Street embezzlers.
Let's move to Part 4 and see how this builds, the most wanted hunt. To catch a ghost, you need a lot of eyes. So authorities launched a brand new effort, a public list focused specifically on major fraud suspects. Look at the strategy here. They wanted to weaponize public awareness to generate a flood of new leads. While the cyber divisions are out there scouring the globe gathering digital evidence, tracking IP addresses, analyzing offshore accounts, and monitoring encrypted communications, the public list acted as a physical dragnet. It drastically increased the pressure, making the world a very, very small place for someone trying to hide.
And the most fascinating part of this dual strategy? According to officials, it worked way faster than they expected. The relentless public pressure campaign, combined with subtle digital footprints left behind on international servers, yielded a sudden, massive breakthrough. And this breakthrough didn't happen in the United States. It happened thousands and thousands of miles away.
Which brings us to part 5, the knock on the door. Once again, we really have to separate Hollywood fiction from investigative reality. The end of this manhunt wasn't some explosive movie-style rooftop chase. The reality was the inevitable conclusion of a slow, methodical, relentless investigation. After nearly 2 years on the run, investigators, relying on some seriously deep international coordination, finally located the fugitive living quietly in the Philippines. When they finally closed in, there was no grand shootout. There was, as the case file describes it, just the moment every fugitive eventually fears, the knock. That simple, terrifying sound at the door signaling that the run is officially over. Authorities apprehended the suspect right there in the Philippines, and it was announced that he had been officially returned to the United States to face the severe legal consequences waiting for him. And we're talking about the reality of facing decades of potential prison time mandated for orchestrating such a massive exploitation of the healthcare system.
Now, while catching this fugitive was a massive victory for sure, it's absolutely crucial to understand the broader context. Federal officials are very clear that this specific investigation remains just one part of a much larger, ongoing effort targeting systemic healthcare fraud. They successfully tracked down the man who ran, but the fight to protect elderly patients from predatory call centers is still very much active. Investigators stressed that the best defense here is vigilance. Seniors have a vital list of warning signs to watch out for. They should always be wary of unsolicited medical calls. Never give out their Medicare numbers over the phone to strangers. Always verify equipment orders directly with their primary care doctor, and absolutely report any suspicious activity to Medicare immediately.
Which leaves us with a lingering, pretty unsettling thought to close out this explainer. We've traced the paper trail, the meticulously coded fake invoices, the exploitation of vulnerable seniors, and this wild global manhunt. But when we step back and look at that $1.2 billion figure, one vital question remains. How does a scheme this incredibly large operate right under our noses before anyone even notices? It's a chilling reminder of the vulnerabilities built right into the systems we trust with our lives. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this incredible case file, and I highly encourage you to keep questioning the systems around you.